Let's have a conversation. Let's have a conversation. Yeah. Let's have a conversation. Oh, yeah. Look. Yeah. Hey. Let's have a conversation. Woo. Pick up some gems, life is all you make. Go. We keep it real, we don't talk to fake. Tell them hottest talk show on the net, coming for all the mates. Let's have a conversation. Woo. Pick up some gems, life is all you make. Go. We keep it real, we don't talk to fake. Tell them hottest talk show on the net, coming for all the mates. Let's have a conversation. Yeah. Let's have a conversation.
Hello, everyone. This is Michelle Biggs, CEO of My Best Everyday Coaching and Consulting, and the host of Real Conversation with Michelle. Decided to do this brief recording post the actual live stream of Real Conversations last night. Y'all, everything that could happen happened like 10 seconds before it went live. My power just goes off. Everything goes off. Good thing is I told the guys to keep it going, and they did. But what you will see is the video podcast starting with the intro of Mr. Jasmin Spain. He is the founder and visionary of two men's support groups. And let me tell you, he truly kicked off what was a powerful conversation with men who were candid, vulnerable, and just gave so much wisdom last night around this topic of mental health. I know someone will be blessed out there, but y'all know I keep it real and look, funniest home videos. Probably need to do some bloopers of myself, but I have a heart for helping people, wanting to help people. And if this video can help just one person, then I know my work is not in vain. And this podcast is not in vain. This platform is not in vain. So listen in. If you are a man who is struggling, like right now in a crisis situation, I want you to call or text 988 ASAP. Someone will be on the other side to help you. They're 24/7. They also have a live chat if you prefer that through the website. You can go to 988lifeline.org. And again, someone will be there to help you. But do what you must to make sure your mental health is in a good place. You are no good to anyone if you're not taking care of yourself. So be blessed. Y'all, please share this video recording to someone you think could benefit from hearing the hearts of men talking about mental health. Take care.
The panelists.
Thank you, Steve. And next up, I have Mr. Jasmin Spain. Hey, Jasmin.
Hey, peace, sister. Say good evening to everybody out there. And again, thank you, Michelle, for creating this dialogic space this evening. My name is Jasmin Spain, as Michelle shared, and I tell everybody that the job that I get paid for is to serve in the field of higher ed as the assistant vice president of student support here in Greenville, North Carolina, at Pitt Community College. But the job that I know I was made and called by the Most High to do is to serve as the founder and chief visionary officer for the main initiative, which stands for Males Addressing Issues and Needs, and as the founder and the president for the nonprofit You Good Bro Incorporated. So, I personally represent for the brothers who grew up in a single parent home with no father. I personally represent for the brothers who had been, molested at the age of 5. Me personally being molested by my female babysitter. And if you know anything about any of that kind of activity, experiences, it wakes up something inside of you that no 5-year-old boy could be awakened to. I personally represent for brothers who have trust issues with Black men by not having a father in the home, but I also represent for the brothers who are hypocrites for being responsible for mentoring Black boys at the same time.
Yeah.
I represent for brothers, despite success and abundance, deals with imposter syndrome. I represent for the brothers who attempted suicide, but by the grace of God, there was no execution. And I personally represent to this day the acceptance of the thorn in my flesh as Paul puts it in the Bible, is a black man who's diagnosed but succeeding with bipolar disorder. And so that's me in a nutshell, if I could wrap it all in one ball. And like my brother Trebor said, I'm saved gladly, boastfully, and a child of God,
Thank you, Jasmin.
You're welcome.
And last but not least, I have Mr. Nathaniel Turner, my resident therapist. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. I think this is my third time here. I was thinking about. I was like, oh, this is my three-peat. This is my three-peat.
Look,
Yeah.
you drop some pearls every time you join me, so I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you for having me again. I'm here with giants today. Everybody has 20 plus years in the field. I am the youth. I am the youth here. So again, my name is Nathaniel Turner. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of New York. I've been in the field for about 5 years now in juvenile justice and child welfare, and most recently branching out and starting my own private practice back in February. That is called Intentions for Wellness, Marriage and Family Therapy, PLLC. I help individuals, couples, and families cultivate emotional and relational well-being that is enriched and refined by faith in Christ.
Thank you, fellas. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, my live button did not go live right away, so it was a little bit delayed. But you guys, I have joining me a minister, life coach, senior leader, fraternity members, therapist, and a gentleman who has been supporting men through a several mentoring groups he has founded. So I think I went live when Steve was chatting. So I just wanted to make sure I did that little bit of an intro. And for those of you who are new to Real Conversations with Michelle, it's a platform that I use to leverage to talk about a variety of topics with the goal that something that is shared you'll be able to apply positively in your life or in support of someone else. So that's the goal of Real Conversations with Michelle. I am a master certified life coach. I am also an associate certified coach through the International Coaching Federation. So I truly like serving others. And I think one of the things that I saw in all of you is this thing I would call servant leadership. You all are doing things in support of other people. And I just want to applaud you all for doing that. Now, having said that, what I want to do now is let's go into the questions, fellas, because this is where the heart of all of this really lies in terms of this broadcast. So I would like for you to rank how you have managed your own mental health. And also, so 1 being poorly, 5 being very well. And what has caused you to pay attention to your own mental health? What was the catalyst for you to pay attention to your own mental health? So who wants to start?
Michelle, I'll get us kicked off.
Okay.
Since I remember being a young man in high school, trying to navigate my way, a lot like my brother Jasmin, who had experienced traumas at various stages in his life. And as a teen, I had a court mandate to seek out counseling and therapy. And at that particular time, obviously, it wasn't something that I identified as an opportunity to work on and improve and become better at. But it was something that others had recognized was an opportunity for me. And so there have been various times in my life where I've done a better job of managing my own mental health. There are times when I would give myself a 5, but then there are other times when I would give myself a 1. Mm-hmm. As a husband now, I've been married, it'll be 19 years this year. And my wife and I have survived seasons of suffering. We have 3 living children, a 15-year-old daughter, 12-year-old daughter, and a 9-year-old son. But what is not obvious to the eyes that look at our family is that we have 4 babies in heaven. We buried our first daughter, who was born early, and then we miscarried 2 times, and then we had a tubal pregnancy once. So during that type of trauma, it's triggers. There are things that that come up about your emotions and how you've handled your emotions over various circumstances and situations that you've survived. And so there have been times when I would give myself a 5. And during those times and during those hard times and during those times of recovery, those were times where I sought out professionals that I could have a safe place to talk with, where it was judgment free. I could be free from the stigmas associated with Black men, because real men don't cry and real men don't show pain, and real men, we don't give up and show our vulnerability. And oftentimes we are told that we shouldn't be transparent, and we shouldn't be open, and we shouldn't let people see our weaknesses. But I've learned that managing my mental health is a sign of strength and not weakness, right?
Yeah.
Oftentimes we're told that, you know, what you do and how you do it is a sign of weakness. But I've learned in my life that actually managing my mental health is a pure sign of strength and not weakness. And so what I encourage all brothers to do is to find that safe place where it's stigma-free, judgment-free, where you can be open and honest, and you can have the conversations that will build you up and not tear you down.
Thank you. You're going into a lot of the content that we're going to be talking about today. So thank you for teeing that up. Terrence, how about you? How would you rank yourself?
Well, I mean, at this stage of my life, I'm turning 63 in a few months. So at this stage, I would rank myself as a 4.
Okay.
But I could also go back and rank myself, you know, as low as a 1, a 2, and a 3 before I got to this 4. You know, in my early 20s, I could rank myself as probably a 3. But in my late 20s, early 30s, I could rank myself as a 1. I was addicted, you know, to alcohol and cocaine for about 2 years. And during that time, I didn't think I was going to live past the age of 32. But, you know, I was raised in the church and, you know, and still had faith. So that tested my faith probably more than it had ever been tested in my life. And looking back, I'm glad I was tested like that, because I made it beyond that. Like I said, I didn't think I was going to make it past 32. Now I'm 62. So, you know, God is good. And it's tested my faith. It let me know how strong my faith was in God and what I could get through. Back, you know, even in my childhood, I was a stutterer all my life. So I always had to deal with, you know, that low self-esteem issue. And I think over the years, that kind of led me into, you know, trying to fit in. And sometimes I would gravitate to, you know, those that I didn't necessarily need to be associated with, but just to fit in, you know, I associated with any and everybody at some point. As I gotten older and wiser and worked in the field of mental health, then I learned I could work with anybody, but I don't hang out with anybody.
Amen.
So at this stage in my life, you know, I became a life coach in the past 10 years and also started to write books in the past 10 years. And I wrote 2 books each year. But I started doing that after I had stopped drinking, because even after the cocaine in the early 90s, late 80s, I still drank. And two DWIs later, I think at the age of 50, I had to make that decision, you know, to let those things go, not just the alcohol, but that lifestyle. So I left that whole lifestyle behind, and I've never looked back.
Yeah. Thank you, brother, for being so vulnerable and telling your story. I appreciate that. Steve, what about you?
Wow, some powerful stories.
Yeah.
Just powerful. So for me, I mean, if I had to rank myself, it's going to be around 4. I try to maintain a 3 at the minimum, even in my toughest times. What drove that is probably I go back about 20 years ago, and I started looking at life differently. And this tends to happen as we mature. And one of the things I realized is that mental health was as important as my physical health, because if I didn't manage that, those things was going to translate into some physical issues, and I wasn't down for that. So as I started looking at that, I got more into emotional intelligence, and I wanted to ensure that my behaviors, or rather my intentions, were aligned with my behaviors. And that gave me a little bit of a barometer to ensure that the way I was looking at things, the way I was conducting things, the way I was thinking, the things I was allowing into my life, the things that I was dealing with, my environments, all of that had to be aligned with the direction where I was going. So I wanted to make sure that everything was purpose-driven. It had to be in the right order, spiritual, mental, emotional, and then all those things translate to your physical behavior. So, but that's one of the things that has driven me, because I have seen the benefits of it. The glass is always half full for me. And whenever I have an issue or I suspect an issue going on, my first objective is understand what's happening, what's driving it, get to the bottom of it, be courageous, be objective with yourself, and then go out and deal with that. And then what I can do from there is use that as an example or best practice to help others.
Yeah.
I really relish in giving and putting out positive vibrations into the world. And it's amazing how that comes back to you. So.
It does. It does. And as you and I had talked earlier, actually last week, I've seen that a lot. And one of the things I think you and I have both been doing is, you know, we see a lot of content on social media, and it really can drain you if you allow it to. And my goal is to put positivity out there, and I know you do that as well.
Yes.
So I appreciate you. Definitely have made me think about some things myself as I've seen your posts, Terrence, your posts as well, and Trebor, your good morning messages. Yes, Mr. Nathaniel, where are you?
Yes. I think that I'm somewhere between a 3.5 and a 4 right now. I heard a little bit from Trebor, Terrence, and Steve. All that resonated with me. Really powerful testimonies, and thank you all for your vulnerability, like just straight out the gate. Similar to Steve, I'm very like objective and solution focused. When it comes to recognizing that like something feels off for me, I'm usually the first person to know. I'm my own worst critic. That's a good thing and a bad thing, depending on who you ask. But for that reason, I never really allow myself to go lower than a 3. But similar to Trebor, recognizing that vulnerability is actually a strength, not a weakness, is something that has really shifted my approach to relinquishing a lot of the weight that I have put on myself for a really long time. Specifically within like the last, I would say maybe 4 to 5 years, I've been going through a lot of transitions from, you know, moving from one state to the next, transitioning from one career to the next, transitioning from graduate school to the working world again. This is my second profession now. I'm still in my early 30s. There's a lot of stuff that I'm still figuring out that I don't have all together. And I feel like I've like accumulated a lot of information and experience all at once. And now I'm kind of in a place of my life where I can sort of like just slow down the pace a little bit and let it actually integrate. Right. And so that's really the thing that kind of like keys me to when it is time for me to really pay closer attention to my mental health. If I feel like I'm getting ahead of myself in some way, or if I feel like I'm particularly anxious, or I feel like it's very difficult for me to maintain routines, or I feel like I'm not contented with the work that I'm doing, I feel like I should be driven to do more for whatever reason, as if I have something to prove to anybody else, right? When I start to have those thoughts, I start to know, okay, it's time for me to actually take a step back, in this vulnerability that allows me to do that.
Well, thank you all. You definitely have put out some pearls out there with the first question. So we're gonna get a little bit even deeper and expound on some of the things that you guys have shared. So, and this question I'm going to pose to Nathaniel and Terrence, but anyone feel free to add on. The term mental health is quite a broad term. So based on your profession, can you explain what it means when we talk about mental health? And more specifically, when we talk about mental health issue concerns, what does that mean? So Nathaniel, I'll start off with you.
Yeah, I think Steve really touched on it just a moment ago, actually, when he was talking about how mental health is really it's connected to all of these other domains of health. I think there was a quote that was circulating the internet a couple of years ago that was saying like mental health is health. Right. You know, by the time something that is off in the mind starts to manifest as a behavior, it's already been percolating in the mind for many, many years. And so it's necessary to first recognize that how you maintain your body, how you maintain your relationships, how you maintain your emotions. I think it was either Terrence or Trebor that spoke to emotional IQ, but also relational IQ. All of those things factor into mental health. So I guess when someone would say that they have a mental health concern, there's something that is off in their life that is causing them some degree of distress. I think in simplest terms, that's the kind of the way that you can look at it.
Okay, thanks. Terrence, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I would add that in terms of mental health, we look at the psychological aspect of our well-being, but we also have to look at the emotional, the social, and the spiritual well-being as well. And when it's off, when they're not in harmony, I think the mental health issues begin to be showing up in our lives because we're not congruent psychologically, socially, spiritually, you know, and so forth. All of that have to be in alignment. And when it's not, then we start seeing the mental health issues, whether it be addiction, whether it be abuse, you know, whether it be from some type of trauma, but it's off. And I think without the help of could be a therapist, coach, counselor, or what have you, it could even be in your spiritual counseling, but that need to be brought, all of that have to be brought in alignment. Mm-hmm. And I think once it's in alignment, then we look at mental health. But when it's out of alignment, we're talking about mental illness.
Yeah. Which is a whole nother conversation when you start talking about the mental illness piece of it, right? Just takes it to a whole different level. And some of you expounded on this just a little bit, but how does mental health and emotional health issues manifest in men? What do you see? And is there a difference? And I'll ask you, Nathaniel, difference in terms of, from a therapy's perspective, how it shows up in men versus how it shows up in women?
It could. I mean, it could. And I'm thinking even I'm thinking it could, in kind of the same way that it can show up differently in children than it can show up in adults. Yes. Context matters. That's something that I really like fall back on. Context matters. And so be it women or men, people are not having an experience in a vacuum. Right. And so, I mean, depending on what their environment is, depending on how their life is peopled, depending on if they are financially stable, depending on if they have any physical health concerns, all of those things can have an impact on how a mental health concern would manifest in that person's life.
Yeah. Anyone else want to add to that?
You know, Michelle, I read a book by a friend of mine, Dr. Deneslia Dorsey, and the title of the book is Our Broken Brains, The Human Condition. And in this book, she talks about the impact of trauma and tragedy and divorce and grief and loss as being real triggers to oftentimes what really sparks an interest in people having to pay more attention to their mental health. And I think, you know, when we look at what we've gone through in the last 3 years coming out of the pandemic, it changed a lot of us. It changed us in ways that we didn't even recognize. You know, I've got 3 children, and my children are all very similar to me, extremely extroverted. I don't have one introvert in my lineage in terms of my children. But, you know, when we found ourselves in a situation where day in and day out, we were the only people that we spent time with, I saw my children become significantly more isolated, even secluded in some ways. and even myself. You know, I love just being around people. I'm one of the few people that you'll meet that enjoys people so much that I'll just go and sit up in a center, or a city center, or somewhere where I just see people moving and just observe them and see how they interact with others. And during the pandemic, I saw the impact on me. I saw the toll it was taking on me, and I saw the toll that it took on me in changing my lifestyle. And so I had to be really intentional about managing my physical health, because as we know, health is health, right? Whether it's mental or physical, and oftentimes, you know, one influences the other, or they both can impact each other. And so I just think about where we are as Black men. We don't always have someone to tell us what we don't know and what to watch out for, and how to manage these issues when they come up. And, you know, I'm making my own notes about the brothers that are on this call tonight, because, you know, I'm already gleaning and hearing some things that I want to tap into them at another time, because I think that they can maybe help me see through a different lens than the one that I'm presently looking through, and learn from their experiences.
Absolutely. This has been the beauty of this podcast, y'all. I have found that I've had guests that just connected. It's about learning and growing together. And I find we're giving information, but we're learning from each other. And that's what it's all about. Trebor, can you list the name? One of my viewers had asked to list the name of the book again, please.
So the name of the book is Our Broken Brains.
Our Broken Brains. Okay.
The Human Condition by Dr. Deneslia Dorsey.
Thank you. And I'll post it as well. Hey, Greg, good to see you. So, and you started to talk about some of the things that may have impacted some mental health, and you know, the pandemic definitely was one of those things, right? And now, what I'm seeing, just retired as a senior human resources leader, but even coming back to what people were trying to come back to, quote unquote, what they viewed as normal, has caused some impact on people as well. But for men in general, what are some of the things that do you guys feel are causing some of the mental health issues that we're seeing in men today? And anyone can speak first. Terrence, I see you leaning in a little bit. You want to kick us off?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
I think one of the things that with the black male, just in general, is just the changes that we're seeing in society from the way it used to be to the way it is now. The way that men were raised, you know, like you said, that toxic masculinity, that have changed probably over the past 15 years. I know the last decade, that's been a drastic change in what is accepted and what's not accepted now. Even when it comes to the male, as they say that, boys don't cry, and boys were taught not to cry. But at this stage in life, boys are being taught that it's okay to be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. Male from yesterday has got to get on board with that, do that, giving a different message. Right. They still may be stuck in the past. So you got men that are stuck in the past messaging, and then you got the men that are up to date on the new messaging. Mm-hmm. But for the child that have to deal with that, it's it's kind of an emotional roller coaster. Yeah. Because they don't know which way to be, depending on if they're trying to please their father of the past or the father of the present, or just society in general. So that's a constant struggle, I think, with the men, particularly the black male boys, because there are still a lot of fathers that are not in the home, and they're having to deal with that issue as well.
Yeah.
When you put all those dynamics together, then it's charcoal.
Yeah.
To try to figure it out.
Steve, and then Jasmin, with your support groups, I'd like to hear from you as well, like what you're seeing with your support groups. What are you hearing as well? Go ahead, Steve, you go.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to piggyback on what Terrence was saying, I see a difference with the younger generation versus the older generations. The younger generations are now talking about things like self-care. They're now more focused on things, and they'll be more open and not necessarily tied into some of the old ways in which people looked at or how we define ourselves from a masculinity perspective. The biggest challenge is getting some of the older generation folks and males, black males in particular, to understand the way you were socialized. It is what it is, but now we are living in a different world, and it is okay for you to talk about these things. It is okay for you to share these things, because mental health, as Nathaniel said, is your health. And when you think about the people that love you, the people that depend on you, the people that want you around, it's one of these things that you really should look at, because at the end of the day, you're really going to add to everybody's life's experience, including your own. So I think some of that is generational, but forums like what we're part of today, right, hopefully goes a long way in changing the narrative and showing a different way, showing that it's okay to talk about things. And that actually makes you a stronger person than you probably thought before. But part of it sometimes can be environment and who you are around. So I always say, hey, talk about it. The more you talk about it, the more you start to influence and shape a different environment for people to see.
Thank you. We definitely need to break the stigma around seeking assistance. And Terrence, Nathaniel, you could probably talk about, we'll definitely talk about that in a few minutes in terms of seeking a therapist. But Jasmin, talk about your support groups and what you're hearing in those groups. What are some of the things causing some of the stress and strain for the men?
I mean, one of the common things that I'm coming across is that unhealed black men are very, very dangerous. It's very you have a slew of brothers who get involved in this mentoring space. I'm pretty sure brothers that's on this panel have been engaged with mentoring programs and been engaged with other brothers who say they enjoy doing mentoring work. But one of the most dangerous things that can happen is if you have a mentor who isn't healed to mentor a young man. And what you're doing is, we talk about generational curses. We're talking about things that are passed down to younger men as to be deemed as what it means to be a man, when those behaviors may not be the most healthy behaviors. However, because you haven't healed, you're passing down these unhealthy behaviors that continue to, be ingrained into a young person's psyche. And with that, they continue to pass that information down. And so we have to really have conversations with grown men about healing first before they put themselves in the life of a young person. And that's been a very common thing that I've come across. But also, we need to talk about language and how we use language. We use the term mental health. We talk about let's talk about it. And actually, in all actuality, that's what it is. But using language like, yo, come holler at me for a second. Put me up on game on what's happening between you and your shorty. That kind of language changes the game of the conversation, as opposed to, hey, come on, let's just talk about you and your relationship. That's where there's the, I won't say a generational gap, but ability to kick, to speak the lingo to make the connection. I work on a college campus. I got black males that want to walk across my campus, but I wear my hat to the back with my suit on. You know what I mean? And the way I don't shake hands with young men unless they extend their hand to shake hands. But for the most time, I give them dap. That right there breaks down a barrier where I can at least have a conversation with them, that extends beyond me being an administrator. So you talk about language, the approach, like even having a conversation with a young man the other day about how he was feeling. He was feeling very angry, and he was talking about how he was pissed and how he was ready to go in on another brother. I said, oh, okay, so let me break this down. So your feelings got hurt. You know what I mean? Because essentially that's what it is your feelings were hurt and it caused these emotional reactions. And the only way for you to say that you had an emotional reaction that would be deemed as manly is for you to say you were pissed versus you were saying that you were sad or you were upset. You know what I mean? So learning the language and being able to kick it with these young folks, can really break down some of these barriers between the more seasoned brothers. I'm not gonna call brothers older. I'm gonna say the more seasoned brothers and the younger brothers. So
yeah, and I'm already hearing just from this conversation, there's some old ways and thoughts and mindsets that some of our seasoned brothers have to change. Stepping into this space where they may have been taught not to show their emotions. And then I'm hearing there's a space of being able to speak to the younger brothers in a language that they understand. And Steve, I heard you even talk about the fact that the young brothers are willing to speak up and more readily talk about what may be happening to them, albeit Jasmin, I know on a college campus, to your point, is how do you get them to be a little bit more comfortable talking about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And meeting them where they are is what I would call it, right? How do you meet them where they are? The support groups. Cool.
Yeah.
Nathaniel, anything you want to add there?
I just had yes. I've been really to Jasmin's point. I've been really impressed with so my caseload is all men. It's all men, a couple of couples, but primarily it's men, and I'm really happy about that because it has given me the ability, and younger men too, like early 20s, early to mid 20s. It's really given me the ability to see that this generation that is, coming up into adulthood right now, they are really aware and really have a desire to be whole. And it is painfully apparent when there are gaps, like experiential gaps. Either a father that was not able to be, emotionally present, even though he was physically present. They're able to really tap into what is lacking in their experience and how it enables or inhibits them from showing up in their own lives. And being able to have those conversations with them has been really powerful. Jasmin's talking about, we're talking about it generationally, and I think that's kind of like more vertical. But like what I hear him saying is he's talking about culture, like being able to move into different cultural spaces, and I think that's more horizontal. And you don't necessarily have to be the same age as somebody to move into that cultural space with them. Really, all you have to be willing to do is like model the thing that that they're looking for. Like if you're willing to take that first step and be vulnerable for them, they will be vulnerable back. Mm-hmm. They will be vulnerable back. And the experience that I've had again is that many men are looking for men to be real with them. Because that facade that they have, it's almost like they got that facade, and it's almost like it's a challenge. It's just like come and break this down. Like it's all I have, but I know that it's not sufficient. So come and break this down for me and show me that there's a different way. And so I'm interested also to hear more about those support groups, too, Jasmin. So
I was gonna say, how do you go about doing that? I know, Terrence, you have held a couple of different types of forums where men can come and talk, and Steve through the fraternities, Jasmin and Trebor, you guys are in fraternities and things like that. Like what can we do more of to bring brothers together so that they can be vulnerable and talk? How do we go about doing that?
I think that. Go ahead, Jasmin.
Go ahead, bro.
I would think that most of it is some of what we've heard already. You got to create non-judgmental safe spaces, and you have to come at it with a sincere heart of understanding. Because if you're approaching it that way, you're going to be listening to hear and to understand. And we talk about breaking down barriers. We are men. We know how we operate, right? Mm-hmm. We know why we put up barriers. Well, we have to use that in the reverse of looking at how we take those barriers down and let that brother, regardless of age or background, whatever, no, it's okay. I get you. I understand. And if when I don't understand, I want to listen because I want to try to understand you better. Mm-hmm. And sometimes just talking about it, giving them the opportunity to download is tremendous. Mm-hmm. So I think the first step is provide that safe space. Challenge yourself not to judge on anyone and look to understand so that then you can start to help them, because you can't help anybody if you don't know where they are.
Yeah.
So you got to meet them where they are. Someone else has said that earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. Jasmin.
Yeah, I just to compliment and to support what Steve just said. You know, one of the things I see great value in is listening to what the conversation is about, listening to what the challenges are, listening to what brothers are painfully going through without actually saying the word that they're hurting. And then use that as a means of getting an idea of what these conversations should look like. But the biggest resource, the biggest strategy that I've seen is just like someone who's asked, what's the best way to lead somebody to Christ is to be able to tell your testimony. And I've learned that by me being very transparent and vulnerable about my life, has been what has allowed people to feel like they walked into a non-judgmental space because I've just aired myself out. You know what I mean? It's different if I step to the table and I ask someone to share some of the most, closeted information, some of their dreams, their nightmares, with me, but I haven't done that with them. And so I see great value in just being very vulnerable and transparent about what it is that I've experienced. I mean, from the outside looking in, it's easy to say, Jazz has it all together. However, let me show you what it looks like to be torn down and to be rebuilt, and still going through the rebuilding process. I'm just glad I'm in a different potter. I'm in a different set of hands, than I was in the past. So I've seen the value of just being very, very vulnerable, and then allowing these brothers to create the space that they need.
Yeah.
I can step to the table and say, this is what it's going to look like. But if you don't get the buy-in from them on what it should look like and the environment should look like, what the space should look like, then, I mean, you're pretty much operating from a selfish space. So.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that's one of the reasons I start my podcast, a lot of them with people talking about their experiences, because I really do feel like people will listen very differently if they know that you are someone who's gone through something similar and you're not just a talking head, right? And I know many of you personally. Trebor and I worked together, Steve and I college, Jasmin, you and I got to know each other a couple of years ago now. Terrence followed you after attending your book, your author forum. And Nathaniel, you and I just become good friends over the course of a couple of years. But I do believe people will listen and be more in tune when they know that the person is real behind. Again, you're not just a talking head. You're someone who understands, right? Yeah. Boy, anything you want to add to
what? Well, you mentioned something in that question about the roles that our fraternities play. And I know that Steve's a member of Kappa Alpha Psi, and Jasmin and I are members of the oldest and the coldest Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. But, we have national programs that are designed to focus on our men and on our young men, one of which is Our Brother's Keeper, right? That's a national program that was developed to advocate on behalf of brothers to help them improve their quality of life. There are many brothers who are struggling. We don't know them all, but that's one avenue that our organization uses to try and partner with brothers from around the globe who are just going through challenging times. In addition to that, we have programs that are designed for young males who are going through those periods of transition. Jasmin mentioned about some of the mentors that are not healed yet. We know and we've all learned that hurt people hurt people.
Yes.
And it's not always intentional. Oftentimes it's unintentional because we don't always know what our impact is having on others. So we have a program that's designed to help young men that look just like the brothers on their screen go to high school, go to college, which it stresses the importance of becoming educated. And we know that knowledge is power. We know the importance of understanding who you are and where you're going. And then at the end of the day, whose you are. And understanding the value of who you are and that self-love. And I think we have to teach our young men that self-love isn't selfish, right?
Yeah.
Self-love is actually one of the greatest forms of love. And so that's an opportunity for us. And then our last project is Project Alpha. Project Alpha takes young men who are ages 12 to 15, and it teaches them to be physically and socially responsible while teaching them to be responsible members of our community. And those are principles that every brother on this screen has. We understand the value of it. We understand the impact of it. But having our organization, our national organization, support these initiatives nationally and globally just gives us a unified front and allows us to be to have the visibility in our communities and to go into schools where they trust us.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I think as a Black man that I've had is my trust has been broken. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I've had people betray my trust. We understand why it is that the majority of inappropriate acts or indecent acts that take place on our children oftentimes come from people that we know and people that we're familiar with. You know, it's because of access and proximity and people that we trust to be in what should be a safe place, and they have access to children and to people that don't know that they should be protected from these people. And so as brothers, we want to be in a position where we can trust the people who are delivering these services. And I think these programs that I mentioned that, you know, members of Alpha Phi Alpha are all familiar with are programs that are designed and built on trust. And we've earned the trust of organizations, of our communities, and of schools that we partner with and that we work with.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I want to make sure, you know, we talk about as well, the D9, but particularly our fraternities. You guys have mentoring programs and other things that you put forth to support men. A lot of times people are hearing about the social fun stuff that we all like to do, but you know, we're built on helping and supporting our communities. Mm-hmm. And I would love to put a plea out there to folks who hear about fraternities to really look at your local chapter and see some of the programs they're putting on in support of young men and mental health, because I know all of the organizations are doing just that. But anyone else want to add? Steve, you want to add anything?
Yeah.
I do. I want to go ahead.
Go ahead, Jasmin.
Steve. All right. Well, I just wanted to support my Black and Gold brother about him sharing about our national programs. One of the things that we also, along with Project Alpha, that we focus on is healthy sexual responsibility. And I think one of the things we don't really talk about sometimes when we get into mental health conversations, a very major part of our conversations when they have issues of mental health involve our relationships with women.
Yeah.
And that's something that we really don't want to lock in on. You know, either we have daddy issues or we got issues with our ladies. You know what I mean? And so one of the things we don't really want to talk about is our issues with women. And so one of the things with Project Alpha, I'm a firm believer of the Frederick Douglass quote: "It's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men." And so, you know, when we talk about building strong young men, you know, teaching them how to build healthy relationships, how to have good conversation and engagement with a female partner, even down to having sex. I think a lot of our mental health issues with men also are tied to our physical abilities to perform. Let's just be honest about it. Sex is exercise. You know what I mean? And so, you know, being able to have healthy sexual relations, you know, and so being able to have those conversations at a young age in support of what my brother's talking about. I mean, that's what Alpha is about, is building these young men to be grown men and being healthy, whole men. So
yeah. And Steve, and I something you said, Jasmin, just and we'll get into it, is what's the output when the men are not being healthy, and you just started to touch upon something, is how do you treat people around you, right? But go ahead, Steve.
Well, and I appreciate my brothers of Alpha Phi Alpha sharing what they're doing. I mean, the one thing that I love about the Divine Nine is that it's all about community. It's all about uplift. It's all about giving back. The Kappa Alpha side, we're heavy into that. You know, whether it's our Kappa League program, which is our youth leadership program, Undergraduate Leadership Institute, which is where we take our undergraduates, our leaders of tomorrow, and we're shaping them to be future leaders of corporate entities or whatever their chosen field of endeavor. But one of the things I really love that we've done, we have a program called Learn to Live. And that is where we work with local law enforcement and Noble. And we're teaching our kids in the community how to deal with law enforcement, understanding that, so that of all the things that they have to deal with, here's something else that we're helping them to educate themselves so that they don't become a victim of some of the stuff that we've been hearing about. Because think about it, that's all part of the whole mental health issue. You're living in communities where, you know, we could go back to the George Floyd situation, and you know, there's so many more that have come before and after. That creates stress in your neighborhoods. You know, I'm in Prince William County, Virginia, the DMV, and it's amazing the crime rate, or at least the reports of so many, you know, crimes that are going on in the areas, and it just gives you this impression of, wow, man, you know, when is this going to end? It's very important to balance that as well with education and providing people an opportunity to have a different outlook. So, you know, a lot of different things we do, but also, you know, that's at the national level. Local chapters are doing tremendous things as well, because specific to their neighborhood and their communities, they have a better understanding of what's needed there. But at the end of the day, it's all about service. It's all about reaching back and bringing people up and pooling your resources and your gifts, talents, and abilities together for the betterment of your own community and mankind.
Yeah, and again, I want to just make a plug. Check out your local chapters of the fraternities, because they are out there doing things, particularly for our young men, but men in general. Just check them out. The mentoring programs are phenomenal. So definitely check them out. Terrence, I know you're doing a lot of work in the community as well. What are you seeing from a mental health perspective there?
I could say a lot in what I'm saying, but well, let me say in general, when we're talking about, I guess I'm gonna say on a national level, before I talk about what I'm seeing in the community, I'm Raleigh, but just on a national level, period, you know, I don't want us to overlook the fact that we are living in a severely traumatized society, you know, and I don't want to understate that, because, you know, we make things so, you know, things try to be normal, but there's nothing going on normal whatsoever. We could talk about guns, we could talk about shootings in the news every day, we could talk about police brutality, we could talk about, you know, the males being shot down, but it's so much that's going on that was exposed after the pandemic and during the pandemic as beforehand. But this society is really sick. So as normal as we try to be and we want to be, and there are a lot of people that are trying to do things to better and uplift this society, but then it's just as many that's tearing it down. So we got to fight on our hands day in and day out to create some positive, because there's so much negativity, there's so much trauma in everybody. We got a class system, a social class system that's traumatized and unfair. We got a political system that's crazy. So it's so much craziness going on all around us. You know, that could be a conversation in and of itself. So when we talk about the Black male, you know, in that system that I just talked about, that's no wonder that Black males feel the way they do, and they are experiencing, depression. Maybe some are committing suicide. We're divided on a lot of issues, and just among each other, because this society is so torn.
Yeah.
You know, and we say day in and day out, that's just a bunch of craziness that's going on that we somehow have to be fixed. And I think, you know, it goes back to that spiritual man. This society have to find that. And even though we do have religion in this society, that's just that, it's religion. but we don't have true spirituality going on. When you look at it, is everything else but that. When we talk about, look at the stuff you see on TV day in and day out, and these games these kids have to play, everything is kill, 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 not uplift, uplift, uplift. And as long as we're seeing that, that's what's being planted and ingrained in adults and kids' minds.
Yeah.
That's got to change if this society is gonna improve itself. And it's not that the capability is not there. If you can put a man on the moon, if you could develop this, that, and a third, then certainly we should be able to heal one another as a nation of people. But we got to want to do that. And the question that you have to ask, do this nation really want to heal one another, or do they want to profit off of one another?
Yeah. So you're making me think. So everything you said is absolutely true. And the question is, what do we have the ability to do that's in our power? Right? So anyone want to talk about that? Let's go there.
Well, Michelle, I said this earlier on. Terrence, you're spot on, right? We have a sick society. But what I always focus on, whether it's personally, I say this at work as well, what are the things that we have authority over? What are the things that we can influence? What are the things we can inspire? I look within myself and I ask that question of myself every day. And when we were talking about what I put out there in the universe every morning, it's all about, can I add some positive vibrations, some positive energy to offset all this negativity? Because in some cases, if that's all you see, then you start to believe eventually, well, that's my reality. So the good thing is that every single one of us has the ability to touch somebody, to influence a situation simply with our own life energy. Mm-hmm. So my first suggestion to any and anybody, I don't care who you are, is to say, hey, is there something I could put into the atmosphere today that might just change somebody's mood? That might just give somebody a little bit of hope. That might just be inspiring to somebody. And it might not even be direct. It might be indirect. I've heard when people said, hey, that posting you put out, I gave it to my daughter who was having a tough day and it just lifted her up. But those little things right there, right, they make a difference. They make a difference because no one's going to save us but ourselves. That's what I firmly believe. So I say, look at whatever you have some authority over, whatever you have some influence over, whatever you can inspire, and go for it. And you'd be amazed how those little small nuggets, those little small efforts translate into something big eventually.
Yeah. And Terrence, I think some of what you were saying is, how do we get people involved to want to help to make a change too, right? Because some of this stuff is not going to happen by itself. And I appreciate all the work that you're doing in the community to try to make a difference and get people to start thinking differently about some of this stuff. And some of the stuff we don't even want to talk about, but we have to talk about. Jasmin, were you going to say something?
No, I was going to pretty much kind of supporting what Steve is saying, that what we can do is control what we can control. And the first person we can control is ourselves. I think a lot of times, like this world of, there's a space of, we're talking about healing Black men, but there's also a space of brothers and sisters who want to heal all Black men. You know what I mean? As opposed to working on healing themselves first. So I've come to understand that regardless of my support groups, the work I do here at the college, that's one thing. But however, I need to take care of myself first. So the first person that I need to be concerned about is taking care of me. Then I take that back to my home, do that with my sons. I do that in my home to display an example of what healthy manhood is, or living a healthy whole life. That translates from my house to my outside of my house, which is in my community. From my community and the work that I'll do, I can do that in my church. I can do that with a rec league. My kids go to school. They exemplify what healthy behaviors are. So it rubs off on the kids. You know what I mean? And so you get that domino effect versus, me saying, bump all that. I'm about to go out here and save all Black men so I can go ahead and get this big accomplishment, this big achievement to what probably is the biggest societal question is, how do we save Black men? You know what I mean?
Mm.
And so there are being amongst, operating your own sphere of influence starts with yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Jasmine. Trebor, and I know you say a lot. I put you on mute, Trebor, because I heard some noise in the background. You can come off mute. I'll unmute you. Go ahead, Trebor.
Okay, thank you. So Michelle, just listening to Terrence, Steve, and Jasmine, I think about what we as a people have had to endure. We've had to, I think that we're all different post George Floyd than we ever were before.
Amen.
I mean, we watched a human being be killed and murdered in front of our eyes over and over and over. At least when we experienced what Trayvon went through, it wasn't just repeatedly shown to us, but I mean, on every social media platform, we watched George Floyd take his last breath.
Yeah.
Many of us are old enough to remember when Rodney King was beaten, battered within an inch of his life by the police. Some of you are even old enough to remember, the assassination of Dr. King and the assassination of Minister Malcolm. We've seen all of this, and as Black people, even my children, I've had to teach them to protect their gates, their eye gate, their ear gates, right? To not just look at anything and everything. I think it was Terrence that mentioned some of the games that children are playing now. The Fortnites of the world. Some of these games are teaching our children to not be as sensitive to human life, or to even be indifferent as they are pretending and playing games. It's different now than when my generation played cowboys and Indians. Oftentimes we were satisfied with using our finger as a gun. This modern generation now is no longer content with using their finger as a gun. They actually have real guns. And so when I think about who we have become as a people, I mean, did we ever think that we would be able to see human beings die in front of us and not be moved? Post George Floyd, I had a close friend who died in police custody. And after an independent autopsy, he was a former NFL player. His name is Glenn Foster Jr. If you ever see any of my posts, you'll oftentimes see a hashtag with his name, Justice for Glenn, in every post that I post, because Attorney Crump and his team did an independent autopsy on Glenn's body, and they found that he actually died of neck compressions and strangulation. And, this happens every day. And every Black man on this screen lives with the reality that we can leave our house today and we can have an encounter that if our white contemporaries had that same encounter, it wouldn't end the same way. Those are conversations that, as a father of a Black boy, I have to have with my son. That's a conversation that I have to have with my daughters when we're riding. Steve mentioned about the program that his organization supports about teaching young men how to interact with police and law enforcement. I mean, we have to have conversations with our children if we're pulled over, if we're in a traffic situation, that our contemporaries never have to have.
Yeah.
I mean, we look at the news. Oftentimes we see what's happening on the cycle. And I can speak for a lot of you and say that we make assumptions about the ethnicity of the killers, oftentimes, because when they hesitate to show their face or show their picture, we know that certain ethnicities and certain demographics are immediately broadcasted across our screens if they commit certain crimes. And others and our contemporaries are oftentimes given the benefit of doubt and assumed to be innocent before guilty, that they actually don't have to prove their innocence like we do. And so I think about the impact of that on all of us and how that's changed us. I'll never be the same after what happened to George Floyd.
I think this nation won't be the same after that. To your point, I think seeing that, I mean, you couldn't get away from it. I mean, you just couldn't.
I tried.
Right?
I tried not to watch it anymore.
You couldn't get away from it. Let me get this back to the mental health with men. And what I want to do is just talk about now some things that men can do to manage their mental health. So Nathaniel, why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that outside of therapy, there are really some very simple things that men can do on a regular basis to I think build up like this integrated lifestyle, right, where they are caring for all of the different aspects of themselves. Men can make sure that they are connected to community. Men can make sure that they're attending to their physical health. Men can make sure that they are engaging in practices of vulnerability, whether with just like other people that they're in relationship with or God himself, right? Men can make sure that they're developing practices of mindfulness. I've one of the things that I heard, all of you have said like just amazing things, and I was honestly just kind of sitting here and gleaning, and I was just like, I love this space. I love this space. I'm learning so much. And I was hearing about all of these different ways in which there are supports for helping people to maintain their integrity, like build up their integrity, and also maintain their integrity. And somebody had mentioned, I think that it may have been Trebor, watching the eye portals and the ear portals, right? Especially as it pertains to the spiritual realm. I think that also goes with regard to pornography, right? Pornography and the cultural push, I think, for a certain type of entertainment, right? I'm not trying to get your stuff flagged, Michelle, but I mean, a lot of the popular music, a lot of the popular television shows, things that people really go to at the end of the day, almost kind of like absent-mindedly, are things that encourage a type of dissociation and disintegration, where it makes it easier, or quite frankly, for us to engage in interactions with other people that dehumanize them, right? Or otherwise dehumanize ourselves. And I mean, straight out the gate, Trebor and Jasmin really shared powerful testimonies with regard to, how sexual impropriety has directly impacted them. A big part of building up men's integrity is building up their sexual integrity. And the fact of the matter is that as Christian men, the ethic with regard to sexual integrity is much higher than it is for the rest of the world. And so I know that with clients that I've worked with, that is something that continually comes through my virtual, the virtual doors of my office. I know that is something that I myself have struggled with at earlier points in my life, and have praise God been delivered from. But I mean, I know that this is something that is very much like an insidious, constant pressure that's always weighing on not only men but all of us. Yeah. So I mean, those are really the only things that I would say. I think that like developing practices of mindfulness, it really can't be understated. Steve, I think that you had said something about like, the people that we have that we can count on are ourselves. And I was thinking in my mind when you said that, I was just like, well, what about Jesus? And then I was just like, but you know what though? I was like, I was like, God partners with us. Like God partners with us. God has given us agency. God has given us free will. He's given us autonomy, right? And so he partners with us. And so there are things that we can do to really activate that agency, activate that autonomy in a particular direction. But it really does require focus. It really does require discipline. And that means turning towards particular things and turning away from others.
Yeah, I would like to add something to that. I agree 100%. I do think it's very important to have a spiritual grounding. You got to have a spiritual foundation, whatever you call it, whatever you want to do, but you got to have a spiritual foundation. Because if you don't, then wherever the seas of change go, you shall go that way as well. So you got to have an anchor, and that anchor then helps you solidify yourself, and then you can move forward. But with that, I think just to add to what you have mentioned, Nathaniel, I think it's very important. Pay attention to stimuli. Pay attention to the things that are around your environment that can influence you one way or the other. You got to be careful of that. Imagery. We live in a world today where there's all types of different images, and oftentimes they are just influencing a little bit of everybody. not necessarily in some healthy ways. You know, Martin Luther King talked about in his speech, the rediscovering lost values, that just because something is being done by everybody doesn't make it right.
Yeah.
And he, you know, coined a phrase called America was living with a relativistic ethic, where right and wrong was merely relative to one's own position. Well, we have that today, where some of the, and I saw in the chat about someone had mentioned it's hard for someone to find a wholesome show to watch with their son. Well, that's just what's out there now. There's some good stuff out there. You got to find it, but this stuff has become so commonplace now that people think it's normal. Yeah. And guess what? It's not normal. All right. Yeah. You know, just because that's what you see, it's not. So I think we have to be very mindful of that. And then especially going back to the question you had posed earlier about one of the things I think men can do, I would have advised anyone, especially men, be mindful of isolation.
Isolation.
You know, be mindful of that. You know, if you think about it, right, God made us to be in community. And when you are isolated, you're left to your own devices. And you got to be mindful that sometimes what you might think you see as right might not necessarily be where you need to go. So these are the things that we actually do have control over because we make choices, right? But sometimes I think some of us need help and need the right support group, or at least the right environment to help steer them.
Yeah, because if you're not seeking help, and men or women, what you end up doing is you're going to things that are not healthy, whether it's drinking, smoking, being in the wrong surroundings, right? Those are the things that happen if you're not seeking the assistance that you need, the support that you need to help you push through these times. And right now we're going through some very tumultuous times right now, right? I mean, we just can't get away from it. So how do we ensure that we are in the right mindset to deal with those things? One of the things I did want to talk about a little bit, and Steve in particular, and Trebor and Jasmin, our men in the workplace and in the schools. What advice would you give in terms of just being able to maintain good mental health in the workplace?
Yeah. I want to, Trebor, do you want to jump in first? Because there was something I had a thought from what Steve was saying earlier, just to add something else on. Yeah, you had.
Sure. I'm just thinking about, my time with Michelle and the years that we worked together, and I was always grateful, but I want to publicly say thank you again. There were times when, in our industry, diversity, inclusion, as well as belonging is something that we will forever be working on to ensure that our organizations reflect the communities that we serve, right? And as an executive in my industry, oftentimes I tell people this, and I say that I'm 3 B's: I'm big, I'm black, and I'm bald. And you learn in executive coaching and with executive presence, you understand how you impact the people in a room that you walk into. And I find myself in certain audiences having to do certain things to ensure that I don't come across as threatening and intimidating and imposing. And sometimes it's the distance at which I stand from someone who's shorter than I am. Sometimes it's the tone and the tempo of my voice. But then other times I was fortunate at times in my career where I had a Michelle that I could just call and I could vent, and I could, if I were in North Carolina, I could come in her office uninvited and without an appointment, and I could just be naked and unashamed in front of her. I think it was Steve that mentioned about isolation. No man is an island unto himself, right? No man, no man, no matter how big, no matter how bald, no matter how black I am. I'm not an island, and partnering and just having that sense of connection to other people who understand what we're going through. Sometimes it's just good to know that, you know what, I'm not the only one.
Yes.
I'm not the only one that's felt like I feel, that's experiencing what I'm experiencing, that's going through what I'm going through. And then there's help, right?
Yeah.
I can survive this. I can make it through this. I can overcome this. And, you know, it's not easy. I look at my career now, almost 30 years in an industry that I didn't even know about when I started college. And I've had very few people who look like me, who were higher than me in terms of reporting structure. And which means that you can do this without a lot of people to advocate for you that look like you do, but you have to be intentional in how you develop and how you work with others. And so understanding that part, Michelle, and just knowing that there were resources available, being intentional about getting to know people. I remember, I think, Michelle, the first time I attempted to get to know you, I went to your church for, I think, Bible study, because I knew Michelle was there. Someone told me she existed. And hey, I was in North Carolina on business. She was a Christian, which was all I needed to know. Like, that's family. You know, where is the church? I'm coming.
I know. And we've stayed connected. I'm so proud of you. And having that person to talk to is important, to know that you're not alone. Steve, if you wouldn't mind talking about because I love the conversation we had last week and what you talked about in terms of just balance. Can you talk about that?
So, you know, work takes a lot of our time, our mind share. But at the end of the day, we don't, at least I don't, live to work. I work to live. And I said earlier, very important for me to continue to understand my why. And that's you can easily lose that if you're not careful. So I am very intentional about that. So specifically, every night, me and my wife, it doesn't matter what's going on, we're going to sit down, we're going to have a candlelight dinner, and no matter what, we know we can look forward to that every day. And that helps balance out some of the stuff that we both have to deal with in corporate America. But you got to be intentional with that. And you can't say, I'm going to do it, and maybe one time you're inconsistent. No, it has to be something that is ingrained. And you know what that does psychologically? It's like every day, you know, no matter what happens, we know how it's going to end, and we're going to be good. Yeah. And we've been doing that. We've been married 17 years, been doing that every night for 17 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And Steve, I know you was also talking about just what you choose to get involved in at work, right?
Oh, yeah. So we actually have a male support group as well for all the Black execs. And that allows us to do a couple of things. One, you have peer support, which is important. Trebor, you talked about it. You know, it helps us understand, hey, we're not on an island. We're not alone with this. It also provides the opportunity to share best practices as you look at working way up the ladder. And then the other side of it is that it serves as a mentoring circle. So those three elements combined is just tremendously healthy for us as we navigate, you know, the corporate world. You also have to have a best friend. Doesn't have to be a bunch, but it has to be one person. I think, Trebor, you talked about how you could just walk into Michelle's office unannounced, whatever. You got to have that one person who you can just download and who's going to get you in a non-judgmental fashion, because that helps to balance those things out. So, you know, there's different things you can do, but you have to say to yourself, I'm going to be intentional about doing it. And I got to make sure that I secure that in such a way so I know that in those moments where you're thinking, man, what's going on here? And you're not sure of yourself. You have one or two things that you can go to help you get a sanity check and balance things out.
Thank you. And Jasmin, you're working in the college environment. Mm-hmm. Talk about that for our younger brothers.
As far as, you know, seeking out support in regards to administrators, for one, if I could speak from that space, I'm a very firm believer in therapy, but I'm also a believer in I have a counselor that I utilize for my personal life, but then I also have a professional counselor. Now sometimes they overlap, but in regards to addressing matters that go on in my day-to-day challenges within the world of academia, I need someone to talk to that is neutral. And so I am a very strong advocate of having someone to sit down and talk about some of the challenges that I face at work. But in regards to young people and young Black men, is to also make connections with brothers who look just like me who are in these particular spaces. Because what happens in regards to mentorship is we talk about mentorship on the outside in regards to relationships. We talk about mentorship about getting involved in certain activities. Because when we think about mentorship, we think about seasoned brothers to very young brothers. And we kind of miss out in that in between and that growth and that development of younger brothers that are going into that young adult phase in life. And so what it does for us on a college scene is help them navigate that space, because you go from graduating from high school to being in a space where you're deemed as an adult, you're on your own, but you're not so much on your own because you still need someone to guide you and to prepare you for the next stage of life and the next stage of manhood, which exceeds beyond just getting a job, but becoming someone's husband at some point, being someone's father at some point, to be in a situation like ourselves, to be able to sit at the table and to help want to support other Black men. So we are very strong advocates. I know for myself and others here on my campus that I connect with about bringing a young man alongside of us. Kind of like that notion, each one teach one. So that's the approach that we take here on our campus. I can't say that it happens at every other campus, because sometimes, we talk about operating in isolation. I've been to some places where brothers are very isolated, serve in some of the same capacities and some of the same roles, but they operate in an isolated, kind of fashion.
Yeah. But seeking support, networking, I would say, is important, especially if you are the only one, to your point, Jasmin, in your space, and it does not appear to be someone there who you could safely speak to. I was networking, y'all. There's a lot of associations out there, professional associations. Get out there and meet some people who are in your circle doing similar things that you're doing, so that you have that support group. Nathaniel, when should someone seek an evaluation?
When whatever it is that they're experiencing starts to interfere with relationships that they have in their life that they hold dear to them, whether that be work relationships, whether that be family relationships, whether that be romantic relationships. If there is some sort of disruption, whether a normal disruption or a sudden disruption that throws off your ability to cope, and really kind of just like come back to that place of centeredness, then it might be time to go and seek help with somebody else.
Yeah. Thank you. And last question, what's the best advice can you guys give to a loved one who is dealing with a male in their circle who is facing some mental health issues? What advice would you give to a loved one?
I'll go first. I know you've got qualified people who deal with this every day, but as someone who has eulogized successful suicide victims, and who's counseled with families who have had family members die from overdose and many other areas that as a result of their mental health, I would say accept that you're not alone and seek help, communicate, share. Don't be afraid to tell others what you're going through. I know that there was a big push over the last couple of years during the pandemic for various members to reach out and check in on their friends.
Yeah.
Let's don't leave any of our friends behind. Don't leave our loved ones behind. Let's reach out to them. And then let's not be ashamed of what's in our family tree. That's one of the things that I think inhibits our ability to get the help we need oftentimes, is because either we don't know what's in our family tree or we know what's in our family tree, either or. Sometimes, when we know that there's mental health issues in our family tree, we want to be the ones who it didn't touch, it didn't hit, it skipped us. And all the while, we're actually the ones who everyone else already knows that it actually fell directly on us. So with that, I think that just making sure that you reach out to the people who are willing and that are there for you, because you're loved and there are people who really are concerned about you.
Thank you. Thank you. Loved one who is dealing with someone who has mental health issue, what advice would you give?
As much as I agree with everything that Trebor said, I'm also going to be the person for balance here and say, also make sure that you rest. Also make sure that to the extent that you can, you have a healthy boundary. Because if you can't take care of yourself, if you're not being taken care of and you're the person that this other person depends on, then if you go down, then that person goes down as well. Yeah. And, you know, it was interesting. I was hearing when you asked the question earlier about how can men, maintain in the work environment. I think that this is kind of similar. Steve has said earlier that, God created us for community. And when you all were talking about community and all of its different variations, right? Steve was talking about his marital relationship and intentionality and how that factors in. Trebor was talking about his ability to drop in unannounced with you, Michelle. Jasmin was talking about, bridging the gap on his campuses, making sure that, the young men understood that, if they needed any assistance, if they needed any mentorship, people were accessible. When I think about community, I think about safety. And when I think about safety, I think about this is a place where I can rest. So much in the same vein where Trebor was saying, like, I need to be able to tell people that this is something that's going on. The telling of people that this is something that's going on is an invitation for us to rest, because while God also created us for community, he also created us for work, and he created us for rest as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Terrence, what can someone have done for you during your times that you were dealing with stuff? What advice would you give to a loved one?
Basically just let them know that you're there for them, that you can, that you hear what they're saying. If they do open up and share with you, let them know that you hear them, and that you're there. But also too, what was said in terms of whatever's in that family tree, let that be an open conversation, and that can be extended even to a family support system, and have that dialogue within the family. Whatever's in that family, whatever's in that family tree, let that be a open conversation within the family, so everyone knows and not isolate or not keep it a secret. What's in the family, what's happening in the past, what's happening in the present, and what can be done, to change those dynamics. But I think it first starts with that personal conversation.
Thank you, Terrence. Steve.
I think the first thing I would do is look to establish trust and let that individual know it's okay. Whatever you're going through, it's okay. I'm here to help you. Yeah. You grab their hand and give them some assurance, help to create some psychological safety. And then the next important piece is to provide resources or steer them in the direction of proper resources. Yeah. Hey, Daniel, you said something interesting. I kind of interpret it as boundaries. You have to be very mindful. I have been in situations where someone had been through some sexual trauma, had not revealed it to anyone but me. And all right, I'm glad that I was able to get you to trust me enough to share that. But as much as I wanted to help that individual, I'm not a trained professional in that environment. So it was one thing to provide an opportunity where somebody felt safe enough to speak about it. But then what was practical was to help guide them into the proper path and get them the right help. So I think you got to balance that. But it starts first with letting them understand, I got you. All right? I'll take your hand. I'm going to help you out. But you got to set boundaries in how you do it.
Making that connection is so important, Steve. I know in my coaching have teetered on some things and come across some things where I had to actually, to your point, hand them off to a therapist, because I'm like, this is beyond what a coach can deal with, and knowing your boundaries around that and pushing people to where they can get the right type of help, right? It's so important. Jasmin, I don't know if I asked you the question. So last man with this question.
Yeah, no doubt. I think it's one of the things to just say it's like Steve was saying, it's okay. It's okay to say that you're not okay, but it ain't good. It ain't okay to stay there.
Yeah.
You know, I will also say that, to understand, to ask the question, what is it that I can do? What do you need from me? Because I think a lot of times we think we know what people need, and we try to prescribe them or diagnose them in the literal and in the figurative space, but ask them what their needs are as opposed to assuming, but also not in our minds, not ask, what's wrong with you, but ask the question, what happened to you, to create that kind of space for them to share, what they may have been experiencing and what their needs are. Because again, I think we take for granted the voice of those who are going through. We automatically assume that, we always want to run and be the savior, and it's kind of like something I heard from one of my mentors is like, there's no Calvary coming to save us. We are the iconic leaders of today to help save ourselves. But when you're in the midst of working with someone who's having some challenges, you have to be very mindful of the boundaries that you have to set. You have to be prayed up when you go into that kind of warfare, because that's some spiritual warfare in itself, not just mental, emotional, physical, and psycho, but this is some spiritual warfare as well. So you got to be prepared before you go in there to be covered on your end, because you don't want to walk into something that you take something back with you that you didn't walk in with. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so just being very mindful of those things, but having that open dialogue, and obviously, being there for them to be a listening ear, but definitely tapping into what their needs are.
Yeah, and to Steve's point, I think Nathaniel's point, taking care of yourself too, because depending on where that person is mentally, it could be a long road, and they need that support. But you also need to make sure that you're in a good headspace to help them. And on that note, you guys, I want to thank all of you for being a part of this podcast. I appreciate all the pearls that you dropped. I told Trebor when I entered into the space and I felt compelled to pray tonight. There could be a brother out there who just needs some support, needs some encouragement, to get the help that they need. Right. And we need to break the stigma around getting help. Right. And Nathaniel, so glad to hear there are men who are coming to you, people like you, to get assistance. And that's what we need to do, is break the stigma that getting help is a weakness. Right. Coaches like myself and Terrence can take you but so far. Right. You got to be in the mindset that you're really willing to do some work and you're putting a plan together to move forward. But if there's some other things that are going on that are causing you to have the trauma that you're having, you need to see someone like a Nathaniel Turner to help sort through that space. So I'm going to ask Trebor to pray. Trebor, if you don't mind, and then I'm going to put you guys. Yes, I'm going to put you guys in the green room. I'm going to close out, and then I'll join you guys in the green room for a few minutes. Okay, Trebor, awesome. Please.
Our Father, our God, our Creator. We learn from the Apostle Paul that he said, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." And God, we understand that a sign of strength is to admit that we are weak, because we all depend on thee. You've assembled a group of men tonight that have been vulnerable, that have been transparent, that have desired to share and to give and to be of value to others. But also, God, you've assembled us so that we would be connected and that we would learn from one another, and that we would know that we are not an island of ourselves, and that we are part of a greater body, that body that has many branches and many members. And so for that, God, we're grateful. We're grateful for our sister Michelle, who has now ensured that these brothers on this line tonight are connected, not just those of us that were on the panel, but those that were in the virtual audience, those that heard, that learned, that loved what they heard, and that were engaged with what they heard, and that will be better after tonight. And then, God, we want to speak directly to those that are going through some things right now, that are going through some challenges right now, that are going through obstacles right now. We want them to know that the 23rd number of Psalm says, yea, though I walk through. We're not going to stay here. We weren't designed to be here. We're going to make it through. We're going to make it through these hard times. We're going to make it through these troubling times. We're going to make it through these trying times. But we're going to do that with the power that you've given us. And then, God, the power that you've given us to connect to a community that's bigger than ourselves, understanding that we can learn from one another and that others are here to help us and that we've got resources to lean on and to depend on and that we don't have to try and do it alone. God, we just want to honor you. We give your name the glory. And in the name of Jesus, we pray for all those that gave us their time tonight. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm going to move you guys to the green room. Like I said, if you stay there for a couple of minutes, let me close out. But I appreciate each and every one of you who joined this podcast tonight. The devil was busy, y'all. My audio decided to go out. Computers went off. I'm like, y'all ain't stopping me tonight. We're having this conversation. But I appreciate all of you who stay connected with the podcast. I'm going to keep up this recording. So if you want to go back and review it, you missed some parts of it, you'll be able to go back and watch it in a replay. Make sure that you're doing homework for yourself. A lot of information is being shared, but as one of my older pastors used to say, you know, you chew the meat and spit out the bone, right? You take the things that really apply, that you felt really can work for you, but make sure you're doing your own research. You're seeking the help that you need that will propel you to move forward in a positive light. As you have heard me say many times, those of you who have followed Real Conversations with Michelle, you are no help to anyone if you're not taking care of yourself. So please make sure that you're doing just that. And on that note, I'm going to sign off. This episode is dedicated to my dad, who passed away on April 1st. He was one of the strongest men that I know, but I also know that in his strength, there were things that were going on that he probably didn't talk a lot about, right? But at the end of the day, I know he became stronger once he did get the help that he so desperately needed. And I thank God for him. Thank God for him and his life. And on that note, the next episode of Real Conversations, I'm going to be dealing with the women, you guys. So June 8th, I'm going to have a panel of women. We're going to be talking about managing through trauma. So something for the fellas and it's something for the ladies. Mental health matters, y'all. Make sure that you're doing what you can to take care of your mental health. On that note, have a good night. Have a good weekend.
Bye.